For what purpose does the gentlelady from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. McEachin pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. McEachin will vote yes on the motion to concur.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Designated by Mr. Rush pursuant to H.Res. 965. I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on the motion to concur.
Nays are 207. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 1164, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 96, House Resolution 1164. Resolution providing for consideration of the resolution, House Resolution 1153, condemning unwanted, unnecessary medical procedures on individuals without their full informed consent, and providing for consideration of the resolution, House Resolution 1154, condemning QAnon and rejecting the conspiracy theories it promotes.
The question is on ordering the previous question. Members will record their votes by electronic device.
Purposes does gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Chu of California, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Chu will vote yes on the previous question.
Purposes does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Fudge pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Representative Fudge will vote aye on the previous question.
You have to wait. For what reason does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Dina Titus of Nevada, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Titus will vote yes on the previous question.
Purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Roybal Allard pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Roybal Allard will vote yes on the previous question.
Purpose does the gentlelady from Delaware seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. DeGette of Colorado pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. DeGette will vote yes on the previous question.
Purposes does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Grijalva of Arizona pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Grijalva will vote yea on the previous question.
Purposes does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Huffman of California pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Thompson of California pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Thompson will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Butterfield will vote yes on the previous question.
Purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
As the member designated by Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Chairwoman Lofgren will vote yea on the previous question. As the member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Chairwoman Johnson will vote yea on the previous question. As the member designated by Congressman Gregory Meeks pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Congressman Meeks will vote yea on the previous question. As the member designated by Congressman Jose Serrano pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Congressman Serrano will vote yea on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Demings of Florida pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Demings will vote yes on the previous question.
Purpose does the gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Frankel pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Ms. Pingree pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Pingree will vote yes on the previous question. And as the member designated by Ms. Meng pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Meng will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida, pursuant to the House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson votes yes on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Wilson of Florida pursuant to House Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Watson Coleman will vote yes on the previous question.
Purposes does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Lipinski pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lipinski will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Napolitano will vote yes on the previous question.
What purposes does the gentlelady seek recognition from the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. McEachin, also from the Commonwealth of Virginia, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. McEachin will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from the state of Kansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Richmond pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Richmond will vote aye on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Rush pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seek recognition?
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by the Honorable Mr. James Langevin of Rhode Island, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I'd like to inform the House that Mr. Langevin will vote yes on the motion to move the previous question on House Resolution 1164. Thank you.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Capter of Ohio, pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Capter will vote aye on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from the state of California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Desagne pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Desagne will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Joyce Beatty pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Beatty, Joyce Beatty, will vote yes on the previous question.
Purposes does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Kirkpatrick pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Kirkpatrick will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Gallego pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Gallego will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker. Okay. Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Johanna Hayes, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Hayes will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Pocan of Wisconsin, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I rise to inform the House that Mr. Pocan will vote aye on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Levin of Michigan, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Levin will vote aye on the previous question.
Purposes does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Mugersel Powell of Florida pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Mugersel Powell will vote yea on the previous question. And, Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hastings of Florida, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Hastings will also vote yea on the previous question. And, Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Payne of New Jersey, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will also vote yea on the previous question.
Purposes does the gentlelady from New Hampshire seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Kennedy pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Kennedy will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Moore, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Ms. Moore will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Liu, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Liu will vote yes on the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Lowenthal, pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lowenthal will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Garamendi pursuant to H.Res. 965, I inform the House that Mr. Garamendi will vote yes on the previous question.
On this vote, the yeas are 226, the nays are 187. The previous question is ordered. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The gentlewoman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call for the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3 of House Resolution 965, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electoral device. Purposes does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Fudge pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Representative Fudge will vote aye on HRES 1164.
Does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Johanna Hayes pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Hayes will vote yes on House Resolution 1164.
What purposes does the gentlelady from New Hampshire seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Kennedy pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Kennedy will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Joyce Beatty pursuant to HREG 965, I inform the House that Ms. Joyce Beatty will vote yes on HREG 1164.
Does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida, pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform that the House, Mr. Lawson, will vote yes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Chu of California pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Chu will vote yes on House Resolution 1164.
For what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Roybal Allard pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Ms. Roybal Allard will vote yes on House Resolution 1164.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Pingree pursuant to House Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Pingree will vote yes on HRES 1164. It's the member designated by Ms. Meng pursuant to HRES 965. I inform the House that Ms. Meng will vote yes on HRES 1164. And as the member designated by Ms. Frankel pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Garamendi pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Garamendi will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For Sorry. Does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Grijalva from Arizona, pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Grijalva will vote yea on HRES 1164.
What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. DeSaulnier pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. DeSaulnier will vote yes on HRES 1164. Okay.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Kirkpatrick pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Kirkpatrick will vote yes on HRES 1164. As the member designated by Mr. Gallego pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Gallego will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For what purpose does the distinguished gentleman from the Commonwealth of Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Dina Titus of Nevada, pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Titus will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Pocan of Wisconsin pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Pocan will vote aye on HRES 1164. And as the member designated by Mr. Levin of Michigan pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. Levin will vote aye on House Resolution 1164.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from Delaware seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. DeGette of Colorado, pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. DeGette will vote aye on HRES 1164.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Demings of Florida pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Demings will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Thompson of California pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Thompson will vote yes on HRES 1164. As the member designated by Mr. Huffman of California pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on HRES 1164. As the member designated by Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Butterfield will vote yes on HRES 1164.
Purposes, does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lipinski, according to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lipinski will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Wilson of Florida pursuant to House Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on House Res 1164.
Purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
As a member designated by Ms. Captor of Ohio pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Captor will vote aye on HRES 1164.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Mukersel Powell of Florida pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Mukersel Powell will vote yea on HR 1164. Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hastings of Florida pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Hastings will also vote yea on HRES 1164. And Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Payne of New Jersey pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will also vote yea on HR 1164.
Where is she from? California. For what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on House Resolution 1164.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. McEachin pursuant to House Resolution 965, I inform the House that Mr. McEachin will vote yes on House Resolution 1164.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seek recognition?
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by the Honorable Mr. James Langevin of Rhode Island pursuant to House Resolution 965, I'd like to inform the House that Mr. Langevin will vote yes on the passage of House Resolution 1164, which provides for consideration of the House Resolution 1153, condemning unwanted, unnecessary medical procedures on individuals without their full informed consent, and House Resolution 1154, condemning QAnon and rejecting the conspiracy theories it promotes. Thank you.
For what purposes does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Ms. Moore will vote yes on HRES 1164. As the member designated by Mr. Liu of California pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Liu will vote yes on HRES 1164. And as the member designated by Mr. Lowenthal of California pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Lowenthal will vote yes on HRES 1164.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from Kansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Richmond pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Mr. Richmond will vote aye on HRES 1164.
For what purposes does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
The member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson pursuant to HRES 965, I inform the House that Chairwoman Johnson will vote yea on HRES 1164. As the member designated by Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Chairwoman Lofgren will vote yea on H-Res 1164. As the member designated by Congressman Jose Serrano pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Congressman Serrano will vote yea on H-Res 1164. As the member designated by Congressman Gregory Meeks pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Congressman Meeks will vote yea on H-Res 1164.
Honestly, it's a gift. I don't know how you.
For what purposes does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Ms. Watson Coleman will vote yes on House Resolution 1164.
What purposes does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Rush, pursuant to H-Res 965, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on H-Res 1164.
Thank you.
and LC, this is prop lead, step 381. Actual F1N level is 12 of 12.
Okay, copy that. 12 of 12. Core 1 LC, step 382. Can you provide status on F1N level? Core 1 LC, countdown 1.
Vote. The yeas are 226 and the nays are 186. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid. Without the resolution is adopted, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I'm asking unanimous consent to take from the Speaker's desk Senate Bill 886 entitled the Indian Water Rights Settlement Extension Act and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Under guidelines consistently issued by successive speakers as recorded in Section 956 of the House Rules and Manual, the chair is constrained not to entertain the request unless it has been cleared by the bipartisan floor and committee leaderships.
A parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman state his inquiry.
Since the minority leader is supportive, or I wouldn't be here, and I'm the ranking member and I'm supportive of it, and the Navajo Nation has been told that the chairman of the committee isn't supportive of it, does that not constitute the clearance guidelines that would allow the Speaker to entertain this motion?
That is not a parliamentary inquiry, but I will state a unanimous consent request for consideration of that measure would have to be received clearance by the majority and minority floor and committee leaderships. The chair is unaware of such clearance. Therefore, the chair cannot entertain that request at
Can
this
I have
time.
a further parliamentary inquiry then, Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman will state his parliamentary inquiry.
Does that clearance have to be in a form of a written statement to the chair?
As the chair previously advised, that request cannot be entertained absent appropriate clearance, which has not been received by the chair.
So one final then parliamentary inquiry. Is the Speaker telling me that if the Republicans have cleared this bill and are in favor of it, it has to have a written clearance from the Democrat side more than simply verbal commitment to the tribe?
The chair has previously stated the clearance that is required that has not been received by the chair.
Did you tell me the form the clearance has to have? In what form must it be?
The chair is unaware of the appropriate form in which the clearance has to be provided, but the clearance must be provided. It has not been so provided, and so it is not appropriate to bring it before the body at this time.
Thank you for your enlightenment, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, and good to go? The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purposes does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Ask that I can address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the conscience of the court and one of the greatest fighters American women have ever had. Justice Ginsburg's dissent spoke for all of us with a righteous anger, a moral clarity, and an eye to equality. Her lifetime of advocacy for women and equality extended far beyond her service on the bench. Though she's irreplaceable, Justice Ginsburg will have a successor. But Americans deserve better than an impeached president's last-minute nomination just weeks before the election. We must honor Justice Ginsburg's dying wish that she not be replaced until the next president is installed. This nominee will shape the future of our country, and the American people deserve a say. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, we rise today as members of the Indiana delegation in support of the nomination of Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court. We can think of no one better qualified to serve on the nation's highest court than our fellow Hoosier Judge Barrett. Her record as a law professor and appellate judge demonstrates her first-rate legal mind and her unwavering commitment to constitutional principles. She graduated summa cum laude and first in her class at Notre Dame Law School, clerked for Justice Antonin Scalia, and returned to her alma mater as a highly respected professor. In 2017, she was confirmed by the Senate on a bipartisan vote as judge on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, where she currently serves. Finally, Judge Barrett is a woman of faith and a dedicated mother of 7. Given her impeccable credentials, she should be qualified and confirmed without delay. We applaud President Trump for fulfilling his promise to appoint judges who will faithfully uphold the rule of law, defend the Constitution, and protect the life and liberty of every American. Thanks, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to praise the heroic actions of Heidi Drees. I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to praise the heroic actions of Heidi Drees, a Jefferson Award winner. On July 1st, 2020, Heidi saved the life of a wounded Charleston County Deputy Mike Costanzo after deciding to stop when she saw a crumbled human on the ground. Not only did she pull over to report and update details of the accident to 911, Heidi did what any courageous and kind-hearted person would do. She comforted Deputy Costanzo in his dire time of need. Heidi held his hand, kept him alert, and she did not leave his side until medical professionals arrived on the scene. Heidi and Mike have mutually agreed that they are connected for the rest of their lives, and Heidi knows that it was a higher power that put her there on that day. I rise today to honor Heidi with the hope that she may be an inspiration to us all if we find ourselves in similar situations. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Tuesday, Blake Lovett, a true giant, not only in the North Carolina agriculture community, but in the civic community, passed away unexpectedly. Blake was a good friend, and to say he made a profound impact on the Wilkes County community would be an understatement. From his time on the Wilkes Board of Education to his role as the president of ConAgra Poultry, Blake was never satisfied with the status quo and believed that complacency was never an option. As chairman of the Wilkes County Republican Party, Blake exercised the level of diligence and grace that was second to none. To Blake's family, I pray that God will continue to bless you and give you comfort during this difficult time. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to honor a fearless, visionary woman who has transcended generations with her legal mind, compassion, and wit. As a Jewish woman, she was a personal inspiration to me, my daughters, and millions of others who follow in her footsteps and are guided by the same values of justice and tikkun olam. In Hebrew, there is a saying, "May your memory be for a revolution," and that aim is our promise to Justice Ginsburg. Around this country, access to vital reproductive health care is hanging on by a thread. Yesterday marked the 44th anniversary of the Hyde Amendment. Low-income women and women of color are forced to make tough economic decisions every day that often put their own lives and that of their families at risk because of their inability to access critical family planning. Justice Ginsburg fought for these women, for all women. She was a tireless defender of our nation's promise of freedom, justice, and equality for all. Yet with her passing, we find ourselves in a push to subvert reproductive rights and dismantle health care protections that 135 million people, including me, with a pre-existing condition rely upon. Justice Ginsburg passed on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the start to the Jewish New Year. They say that those who die on this day are a tzaddik, or a person of righteousness. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was certainly that and more. May Justice Ginsburg's memory be for a blessing and her example a righteous inspiration for us all. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. In my home district of Central Washington, the history and the culture of Hispanic Americans is woven into the fabric of our communities. From small businesses and manufacturing to agriculture and artistry, the success of our communities is dependent on the success of our diverse and vibrant Hispanic populations. Earlier this year, the House passed legislation to finally establish the National Museum of the American Latino in our nation's capital. It is my hope that this museum will empower all of us to learn about and engage with the history of Hispanic Americans and their contributions to our history and our culture. In Central Washington and across the country, we are proud of our Hispanic friends and neighbors who prove that the American dream is alive and well. Because of them, we are a stronger, more diverse, more prosperous society, and I urge my colleagues to join me in celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Aloha, Mr. Speaker. I ask consent to address the House for 1 minute. Revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 hit Fort Bend County hard in March. Our local concert venue, the Smart Financial Center, has not rocked since. Yet Fort Bend County has rocked on. The Fort Bend Hope Clubhouse kept rocking. Proof? Rocks I received from their director, Carrie Beth Cunningham. We met Monday back home. She gave me these 2 rocks with a common message, hashtag Clubhouse Rocks Texas. They rock because they're giving people with mental conditions the skills they need to build confidence and independence. Members choose every day where they want to work in the kitchen, go to class, clerical work, technical work, or just outreach about the magic happening at the clubhouse. Keep rocking, Fort Bend Hope Clubhouse. Let's rock into Mental Health Awareness Week that starts next week. Mahalo, I yield back.
Gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I want to take this time, Mr. Speaker, to not only speak to the American people about voting, but just take a brief moment to pay a beginning tribute to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She deserves a much longer period of acknowledgement, and I'm going to do so as we return back to Washington in the coming days and weeks. In fact, I believe that we should dedicate weeks and days of honoring Justice Ginsburg, even in the midst of this potential nomination to replace her. But I wanted to speak to the American people as we begin our journey toward November 3rd and let them know of the precious right to vote, that citizenship gives them that very precious right to make their own decision. I have no right to tell them that. But as a member of the United States Congress, I have an obligation to ensure that their vote is protected, however they vote. I must ensure that the mail ballots, that there is a truthful understanding of mail ballots. Some states have been voting mail ballots for decades. I must ensure that the mail ballots are protected, the early vote is protected, and as well, it is protected on November 3rd. I just want to indicate Justice Ginsburg said in the Shelby case that the majority's logic was akin to throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. She believed in voting and voting protection. Let's pay tribute to her and vote. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week I introduced H.R. 8332, the Plugging Orphan Wells and Environmental Restoration Act, or the POWER Act. This bill would reauthorize the federal orphan well remediation program under the energy policy of 2005 for 5 years at $50 million per year. The POWER Act would also establish a grant program for environmental restoration and reclamation of orphan wells on state as well as private and tribal lands, authorized at $400 million per year for 5 years. It is estimated that Pennsylvania has more orphan wells than any other state. Pennsylvania is the birthplace of the modern petroleum industry, and the Commonwealth's oil and gas industry has helped lead America to energy independence. We have both an economic and environmental responsibility to ensure abandoned wells are plugged, and the POWER Act will ensure these legacy sites are appropriately handled to protect the environment while also stimulating jobs in the oil and gas sector. This will be a win-win for America and a win-win certainly for Pennsylvania. I'd like to thank Guy Reidenthaler, my colleague from Pennsylvania, who will be for joining me on this legislation, and urge my colleagues to support oil and gas well remediation through the POWER Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, in accordance with Section 114B of Division A of the Continuing Appropriations Act 2021 and Other Extensions Act, H.R. 8337, the Act, I hereby designate for overseas contingency operations / global war on terrorism all funding, including the rescission of funds so designated by the Congress in the Act pursuant to Section 251B2A of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985, as outlined in the enclosed list of accounts. The details of this action are set forth in the enclosed memorandum from the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Signed sincerely, Donald John Trump, the White House, October 1st, 2020.
Referred to the Committee on Appropriations and ordered printed. The chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, in accordance with Section 114B of Division A of the Continuing Appropriations Act 2021 and Other Extensions Act, H.R. 8337, the Act, I hereby designate as emergency requirements all funding, including the rescission of funds, so designated by the Congress in the Act pursuant to Section 251B2A of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985, as outlined in the enclosed list of accounts. The details of this action are set forth in the enclosed memorandum from the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Signed sincerely, Donald John Trump, the White House, October 1st, 2020.
Referred to the Committee on Appropriations and ordered printed. The chair lays before the House a communication.
To the Congress of the United States, the Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, Madam, on September 30th, 2020, pursuant to Section 3307 of Title 40 United States Code, the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure met in open session to consider 33 resolutions included in the General Services Administration's capital investment and leasing programs. I have enclosed copies of the resolutions adopted. Signed sincerely, Peter DeFazio, Member of Congress.
Referred to the Committee on Appropriations. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2019, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, is recognized until 10 p.m. as a designee of the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of the special order.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, fires are ravaging the West. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the fires, and I want to talk about what's not going on here in Congress. To start with, I just want to take a quick look at the science of fire. This fire triangle shows that 3 things are required to have a fire. You have to have fuel, heat, and oxygen. There's a lot of talk about what the role climate change is playing in these fires. Climate, increasing temperatures can draw fuel. If it gets windy, you can have more oxygen. Lightning can be one of the things to ignite fires, but a lot of fires obviously are ignited by man-made ways. When we talk about putting out fire, the first thing we do is try to get the fuel out of the way, or we use water to cool the fire and remove the oxygen. But we have to spend way too much time working on extinguishing fires when we could take the actions to reduce the fuel to reduce the fires. Anytime I talk about forest management, I get accused of wanting to clear cut the national forest. And I can promise you the last thing I want to do is clear cut the national forest. I want to use good management on the national forest. That's what we should be doing. But I often wonder if those people who talk about clear cutting even have any idea what a clear cut is. And I've put this chart together that shows a comparison between a clear cut and a catastrophic wildfire. And I'll go on the record and say that catastrophic wildfires are worse than clear cuts. And look at the data. During a clear cut, the trees are killed. During a catastrophic wildfire, the trees are killed. During a clear cut, the trees are removed. During a catastrophic wildfire, you're left with dead snags that can be fuel for additional wildfires. All vegetation is killed. That's what happens in a catastrophic wildfire. At least in a clear cut, you leave the residual grasses and the shrubs. Stream zones are protected when a clear cut's done. You leave vegetation around the streams. Catastrophic wildfire burns to the edge of the water. Soil organic materials are all burned up in a catastrophic wildfire. Special care is taken to protect the soil in a clear cut. When a clear cut is planned, a plan for reforestation is also in place. Often on catastrophic wildfire, there is no reforestation. As far as planning goes, it's extensive with a clear cut, it's unplanned and uncontrolled in a catastrophic wildfire. The size of a clear cut, in California, it's less than 20 acres. Wildfires are huge, burning millions of acres. We've almost burned 8 million acres to date in the wildfire season this year in the U.S. And we can continue going down the list, but you can see, even talking about carbon, at least with a clear cut, you're putting the wood into a material that stores carbon. With a wildfire, you're releasing the carbon into the air, and these dead snags eventually rot, and they're not just releasing carbon dioxide like the fire does, they're releasing methane, which is the worst greenhouse gas. Clear cutting is not something that we want to do on the national forest, but people who are not allowing good forest management, and that's Congress with the rules that we have, are doing something much more devastating than clear cutting by allowing these catastrophic wildfires to continue unabated. Just as an example, this is the Angora fire. That is a natural clear cut. That's a stand replacing fire. This is 12 years later where you have no regrowth on the site. On top of that, according to the USGS in 2018, the carbon emissions from wildfires released the same amount of carbon as the emissions that would be produced by generating enough electricity to power California for a whole year. Mr. Speaker, we need to take action. It's not that the Forest Service doesn't know how to manage the land, it's that we have tied their hands and we've allowed activists and lawyers to manage the forest rather than the professionals in the Forest Service. If we don't want to see the same things repeating over and over with loss of life, loss of property, loss of a resource that actually pulls carbon dioxide out of the air and can be used to reduce the effects of climate, we should do something proactive and actually start managing these forests. It's time to act, and unfortunately, Congress has sat on our hands while we continue to watch the West burn. With that, I would like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
First of all, I'd like to thank my friend from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, for organizing this special order and for his leadership and expertise on forestry issues. The events of the last month and the last decade plus show how poorly our current forest management policies are and that they're broken and in drastic need of reform. Nearly every corner of the West has been touched by catastrophic wildfire. My district has been home to several major fires this year, including the bush fire that burned over 193,000 acres, and 700,000 of acres of land in Arizona have been burned across my state. Even before this year's fire season broke, the evidence of our forest management practices are clearly broken. In the last 10 years alone, wildfires have burned over 74 million acres of land in the West, and our federal government reaction to this has been extremely lacking. These catastrophic fires have devastating impacts on the environment and health. For example, one large wildfire is roughly the equivalent of a major volcanic eruption, releasing large amounts of dangerous particles into the air. This increase in air pollution exacerbates respiratory illnesses such as COVID-19. Because of this, earlier this year, I led a letter to the Agriculture Secretary Perdue and Interior Secretary Bernhardt. This letter urged them to act quickly to secure contracts with private businesses to ensure that firefighters could be properly protected from COVID-19 and that the aerial support they needed to adequately fight catastrophic fire was there. Recent studies conducted at George Mason University show that on average, a fire stands a higher probability of being contained within 24 hours if air tankers are deployed on that fire within the first few hours. Fires that do not receive air tanker support for a period of 13 hours or more are likely to take days or weeks to achieve containment. I also led a letter to our Attorney General Barr that urged him to ensure that the Justice Department's Natural Resources Division was adequately resourced to fight frivolous lawsuits from radical left-winged environmental organizations. Lawsuits from radical environmentalists are nothing new. We have seen this already in Arizona with the disastrous Wild Earth Guardian lawsuit regarding the Mexican spotted owl. In that case, the U.S. District Court judge in Tucson issued a ruling based on bad and debunked science that stopped active forest management activities in 6 national forests, including the Tonto National Forest in Arizona, which was home of the bushfire. This decision was a massive setback, and it's directly contributing to the enhanced fire risk that threatens our communities that we're seeing across the West. A devastating wildfire season is not inevitable. It isn't something that we must just accept. There are steps that can be taken now to ensure that our communities are protected. I continue to urge the federal agencies to be tasked with managing our forest fires and fighting catastrophic fires with bold action that is necessary. Lives depend upon it. Just last year, as chairman of the Congressional Western Caucus, I had the opportunity to visit with the district of my friend from California, Mr. McClintock, where aggressive forest management practices in the Lake Tahoe Basin have prevented catastrophic fire. This active management was made possible by getting unnecessary red tape out of the way and putting what is most important first, protecting our communities from the destruction of a wildfire. Just in the last 2 years, this administration has taken steps to manage vegetation inside utility corridors, build additional fire breaks, and reform the NEPA process within the Forest Service. However, so many years of inaction, there's a long road to hoe to where we have to get, which is why I'm so pleased we're here tonight, calling for serious action by this House. There's a few pieces of legislation that have been introduced. I just want to name a few. H.R. 7978, a bipartisan comprehensive forestry reform bill led by the gentleman from California, Mr. Lamalfa. This, as well as H.R. 2607, the Resilient Federal Forest Acts by Mr. Westman, both of which I'm proud to support. The Democratic leadership in this House has been transparent about the fact that they do not view forest management to prevent wildfires as a legislative priority, and that has deadly consequences. Again, I want to thank my friend from Arkansas for holding the special order and with his leadership and expertise on this issue, and I yield back to him.
Thank the gentleman from Arizona, and I recognize the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Newhouse, for 3 minutes.
Thank you to my good friend from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman. As we all know, the West has been on fire. In my home state of Washington, over 700,000 acres have burned, causing thousands of families to evacuate, leaving their homes, their businesses, and their farms behind. Whole towns have essentially been wiped off the map. Smoke blanketed central Washington with fires raging up and down the West Coast. The air quality of our cities and our rural areas ranked the worst in the world. As the people of Central Washington and many of my colleagues in Congress understand, healthy, resilient forests are the key to wildfire prevention. We've made significant progress, but there's still much work to be done. Without our leadership in Congress, families will continue to lose their homes, and their businesses and jobs will continue to be lost, and our public health will continue to be threatened. And while the loss of homes and livelihoods is heartbreaking, there's nothing more tragic than the loss of life. Today, I join the people of Central Washington in mourning the loss of one-year-old baby Highland, whose life was tragically cut short as his parents fled to escape the Cold Springs fire that was raging across Okanogan County. The Highland family has suffered immeasurable loss with the deaths of both their toddler as well as the death of their unborn child. My heart aches and my prayers go out for the Highlands as they recover from their own wounds in this unimaginable heartbreak. These tragic circumstances fall on us, Mr. Speaker. We are responsible as the federal government for failing to deliver a management strategy that enables us to prevent these catastrophic events. We cannot continue to sit idly by. We have to responsibly log our forests and graze our lands, or we will watch them burn. These wildfires and this year have truly tested our resilience, but of this I am certain. In the face of catastrophe, Central Washington will recover. Now, it is the federal government's responsibility to do everything in its power to prevent another disaster like this again. Thank you, Mr. Westerman.
Thank the gentleman from Washington, and I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer.
I thank the gentleman from Arkansas for holding this discussion about forest management. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today because California's forests suffer from neglect and mismanagement, resulting in overcrowding that leaves them susceptible to disease, insects, and wildfire. These are not my words. They're the words of the Little Hoover Commission, an independent state oversight agency in California. In their 2018 report entitled Fire on the Mountain, the Little Hoover Commission called for a transformational change in California forest management practices after a century of mismanaging Sierra Nevada forest has brought an unprecedented environmental catastrophe that impacts all Californians. That's a direct quote from the report. California's own Legislative Analyst Office agreed and found that limitations on timber harvesting, an emphasis on fire suppression, and an increasing number of environmental permitting requirements have led to unhealthily dense forest. Thankfully, both groups recognize that common sense forest management practices could not only help prevent wildfires, but also reduce carbon emissions. Properly managed and healthy forests are more resilient and sequester more carbon than overgrown forest. Simple recommendations like shifting from fire suppression to using fire as a tool and setting up long-term forest management strategies are just a couple of the low-cost solutions that can help us achieve healthier forests. Unlike policies such as the Green New Deal, these practices would actually help address wildfires and would not cost trillions of dollars to implement. Furthermore, these actions can all be taken today, and they fall in line with some of the things that my Republican colleagues and I have been suggesting on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, that if we take action to mitigate and adapt to the climate change that we know is going to occur, we could avoid some of the catastrophes that we're seeing playing out in California right now and in other places in the West. If you care about protecting our citizens from wildfires and reducing carbon emissions, then you should support responsible forest management. Instead of wasting time on unrealistic solutions, we should take serious action to prevent unnecessary wildfires and improve the carbon sequestration potential of our forests. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman from Alabama, and I recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Arkansas for hosting this special order on wildfire. Mr. Speaker, over the past decade, there's been an average of 64,100 wildfires and 6.8 million acres burned every year. With over 10 million acres burned, we saw the highest number of federal acres burned in 2015 and nearly that amount in 2017. But this year has been even worse. 2020 has been an extremely difficult wildfire year for our firefighters, our responders, and many rural communities in and near the forests. As of today, October 1st, over 44,000 wildfires have burned nearly 7.7 million acres this year alone. In addition to the destruction of these forests, homes, and property, we sadly continue to see lost lives. Over the past 25 years, active management has plummeted across the national forest system. Consequently, it is no coincidence that the larger and more intense fires are happening on federal lands where there is less management versus state and private lands. More individual fires occur in the east, but the wildfires in the west are larger and burn more acres. Wildfires also have significant impacts on eastern forests because of the budgetary effects on Forest Service's ability to manage and personnel. We must be encouraging more active forest management across the national forest system. This includes thinning, prescribed fires, and hazardous fuels reduction, especially on the roughly 90 million acres of federal lands that are already known to be at high risk. I thank my colleague, Mr. Westerman, for his great work during the last Farm Bill and his leadership with the Resilient Federal Forest Act and the Trillion Trees Act. Through the next Farm Bill, I'm hopeful that we can continue to build on these common sense reforms that will provide more authorities to help the Forest Service better manage and encourage more partnerships. And with that, I yield back.
I think the gentleman from Pennsylvania, and Mr. Speaker, I just want to illustrate here that this isn't difficult. It's not rocket science. This is a control in the first picture. You see all the underbrush, the ladder fuels. This is on federal land as well. You see the forest management in the middle where you thin it out, you do controlled burns, you do those every few years, and you get a resilient forest that looks like this. California and Oregon and Arizona and Washington State, Nevada, they could have forests that look like this. Now, they would be those species that are out there, and the management would be accordingly, but there's no reason we can't do this. It's Speaker Pelosi's state that's on fire. It's Chairman Grijalva's state that's on fire. It's Chairman DeFazio's state that's on fire. I wish that Democrats would take time to do what's right, to address these fires, to quit playing politics with relief bills that are going nowhere and do something that could really help the people in their states. We want to help, but we can't do it on our own. We're in the minority. We will work together and offer suggestions, but it's going to take a bipartisan effort to change these rules so that management can take place. I yield back.
Pursuant to Section 4B of House Resolution 967, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.